Hi, I'm Kandis Porter, and you are listening to Awaken Nation with Brad Salas.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Salas, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people, just like you and me, from all over, who are doing amazing things. Welcome to Awakened Nation.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I have the Kandis Porter on the show today, and she was introduced to me through our good friend Damon Lemby. Kandis, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
If you're in the learning and development space, if you're HR, are you just looking on how to get your life together? Kandis has written an extraordinary book, and I'll hold it up to the screen real quick for those of you watching at home on YouTube. Good decisions equals success. And I'd like to know that I've made some good decisions in life, but stop decision anxiety and start taking action. I always feel the subtitle is where the meat of the book is, and there it is. We're going to have some fun today. Am I right, Kandis?
We are going to have lots of fun today, Brad.
Good. Um, Let me read your bio. Here we go. I have it all set up. It's, because I'm a pro, baby. Kandis Porter is the founder and managing director of Effective Flow Connections, or EFC, a management consulting company that helps transform organizations through project management, process improvement, change management, facilitation of key meetings, and training. Kandis also works one-on-one with clients, focusing on leadership development and growth. In addition, Kandis is the author of the book, as we mentioned before, Good Decisions Equals Success. Please welcome to the show, Kandis Porter.
Woo! So happy to be here.
Yes, and I have to say it again. Thank you, Damon Lemby, the Learn It All leader himself, for introducing us. Very excited. Oh, and I don't know if you saw Pablo, his little puggle,
Oh,
made an entrance on our show near the end, so that was fun.
I love Pablo. He is so fantastic. He loves to eat and go on walks. So,
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
and I absolutely adore Damon Lemby. I've worked with him for many years, and he is honestly one of the nicest and best people I've ever met.
He is. I was really surprised and very grateful that I met him. You know, it's not always that you meet some great people on the show who are just givers. And Damon was. He gave me 4 new guests just out of the blue, said, "Hey, you got to do this guy's show." So big shout out to my brother, man. So let's dig in on this book because I feel like I've made a few mistakes in my decision making process, but we have a hot buzzword today, which is collaboration. And I, as a creative director and art director, production manager through those years in New York City, I find that, collaboration doesn't always work. And you said it best in the book. This had me cracking up, but you said implementation in large projects will normally require many people to be involved. It's still critical that there be one person ultimately responsible for successful outcomes. If everyone is responsible, no one is responsible. Boom. Love that. Have you ever tried to plan a family Thanksgiving without a keeper of the menu? You'd end up with dozens of pots of mashed potatoes. Let's talk about that because I like collaboration, but you can't make decisions by committee. Am I right?
Absolutely. And collaboration, when some people hear that word, they just get so inspired and excited. When others hear that word, they cringe. Their personality types may be more of, I want to be a heads down working in Excel. And so we have to recognize that having both types of people in the room is very important because they may think differently. And we need to be thoughtful about how we're making decisions when we do have a diverse group of people in the room. And what I mean by that is consensus is nice. It's actually something that you should strive for when making a high impact decision. We also need to be realistic that consensus is not always possible. And it slows down the process if we try to get everyone 100% there. And so we need to have a backup plan. We need to have something in our back pocket where we say, hey, we're making a decision today. We're striving for consensus. And if we don't get there, we're voting by majority or whatever that backup plan is so that we can still get over the finish line. Because in today's business world, time means everything. If we're sitting around talking about making decisions for 6 months, we may be 6 months behind the company that went in a room and said, we're making a decision today, our competitors.
It is kind of frustrating. I remember the book, Five Dysfunctions of a Team, a leadership fable by Patrick Lencioni. And I found that book funny because we do live in this world of myths, and the myth that a team accomplishes far more. I analyzed team behavior as well in my first book, Liquid Leadership, and that is it has to work like commandos in the field, where each one has a strength, and that strength is asked to, step forward, and that person becomes the leader in that moment. But they have to back off for the ultimate larger picture with the main leader deciding, well, maybe we don't need a bomb expert today. How do you deal with this? Because we're in a day and age where, my generation saw some of this speaking up and talking out as insubordination. And now everybody wants to sit there and go, well, I have the right to have my input. And that input, a lot of times, may not be in alignment with where the direction of the company is going. And so, how do you handle that as a leader? Because I don't want to be that person who goes, well, you shut the hell up and sit down, which is my father's generation. But at the same time, you have to be a little curt and say, well, we're going to use your idea next time. How's that?
It is all about how you set up the environment. And there's some key things that you can do to, set that up appropriately. You need to let everyone know that they're encouraged and actually paid. If we're talking about a business decision being made, people are paid for their brains. And so you don't want a lot of people sitting around the table just shaking their head yes. That leads to a groupthink atmosphere. And there are a lot of mistakes in history that were made because of groupthink, where when they went back and interviewed some of the people, another good decision-making book, I'll just put it out there, Decisive by the Heath brothers. I love that book as well. I'm all about giving shout outs to other good books. They talk a lot about groupthink as well. And they do some case studies in there about some bad decisions that were made and how that was the cause of it. So we do include some specific tips in our book for how to set up a trusting environment, encourage people up front to speak freely, and make it a brainstorm type atmosphere. Ask people to check judgment at the door for that portion of it. And something that's really important that unfortunately I don't see enough in the meeting rooms, ask the most senior leader to go last. If you walk in and you say, I'm Kandis, I'm the CEO of the company, and here's what I think we should do. And I say it very confidently and say, how many of you agree with me? That is not setting up an environment where people are going to speak freely. They're probably going to be like, yeah, of course, that's the best idea. Like, you're the more ranking person. And I do have the military background. And so I'm very comfortable, familiar with that type of, do what you're asked to do. And let's not hear feedback on that.
Yeah, command, control, those are the old paradigms, and you were trained in it. What branch of the military did you serve in?
I was Air Force.
What?
Yeah.
We had Kim Casey Campbell on the show, the fighter pilot who brought back her A-10 Warthog, battle damaged. And wow, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Was it easy for you coming out of the military? You just kind of said you were comfortable with it, but was it easy for you to transition from that leader who's, all right, this is my rank, you're going to listen to me, to, okay, let's listen to everyone's journey? How did you handle that? Was it that I'm sure that didn't happen overnight. You had to work at it, right?
Absolutely had to work at it. And I do talk to a lot of transitioning military that struggle with some of those exact things. I have to say, it's a learning curve. You do have to shift your mindset.
Yeah.
And I started out enlisted. I was a weather forecaster when I first joined the Air Force, finished my degree while I was active duty, and then applied for officer training school, got accepted, went through officer training school. So I was lucky. I got 2 boot camps in my first 4 years in the Air Force. And then I commissioned. And so I was on both sides. I served enlisted, I served officer. And my last duty station was at the Pentagon. I was a captain there. And
Wow.
so I was the lowest ranking, let's be honest. I was one of the lowest ranking people there. I worked for a couple of 3-star general equivalents, and I worked in the front office. So every time they would come in, it's customary to shoot up out of your seat and stand, at attention until they tell you at ease, and you sit back down and start doing your work again. So I was very fit when I was there, if you can imagine.
Yes.
And I'm
2 boot camps.
yes, I'm getting to answering your question. I just need to, get the context there. When I left the military, I went to a large consulting company in the Washington, D.C. area. And I worked for a fantastic lady. Her name was Robbie. When I would have her walk into my office, I would shoot up out of my seat. And I did that until she had to actually sit me down and give me feedback. Candace, you need to relax. You're making everyone uncomfortable. You can't do that. But she was higher ranking. She was the boss.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So it was that shift in mindset where Robbie didn't want me to be a yes person. Robbie wanted me to critically think and give her my opinion. And so she created that trusting atmosphere. She was an incredible leader to work for. And I started to feel more comfortable, and I started to realize that, when I share my ideas, there's yeses sometimes, and that's cool. I'm actually adding value and contributing. Now, that's one of the reasons why when you are encouraging people to share, we want to check that judgment. Because if I say, Brad, tell me the best idea you have, and you share, and I say, that's horrible idea, Brad. Why would you think of that? It doesn't take that many times of getting hammered until you quit sharing your good ideas, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, transitioning took some time, a shift in mindset, and honestly, building up your confidence a little bit.
That's an incredible journey because, you could have stayed in the military, but you decided to go down this path where you're forced to learn the opposite, because if you're going to be working with people, their contribution has to be taken into consideration. And I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. So I'd start a company and grow it. I took one of my companies public on NASDAQ, and I realized, I was dealing with that very first wave of generational issues where they weren't trained the same. Okay. And, they were taught to speak up, talk back to the CEO. Their contribution was worth its weight in gold, because if they weren't there, the company would sink. They actually had this mindset. And I had to learn to manage differently. I actually went to NYU. My business partners made me go to learn how to manage better, manage people better. And because I was from that old command control attitude. But as an entrepreneur, and this is why I'm bringing this up, a lot of times we as entrepreneurs we have to make a decision with only half the information. And you talk about this in the book, defining outcomes. To define an outcome, you need kind of as much data as possible. Or if you're doing a campaign or design, you have to have some inkling or idea of how your customer is going to respond. How do you make decisions in this day and age when you don't have all the data?
You have to be willing to say, we're going to make a decision and start down this road. And if we find it's not going as expected, we're going to shift course, and we're okay with that. Mm-hmm. So it's all about taking on risk, right? and understanding that you can have backup plans. So we're going to try to mitigate this not going well, but we're going to have a contingency plan. So what's our backup plan if we start moving in this direction? You know, in my opinion, there's never a perfect time to do anything. And if you're just waiting and waiting and waiting to have 100% of the information, probably the first round of information that you gathered and had is already changed. So then you need to wait, you need to get that data refreshed. So you're just never going to be at 100%. And you have to say, good enough is good enough. I'm willing to take a risk and let's go. And we'll shift course as needed.
Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you pick up her book, Decisions Equal Success, because you go into this. I mean, I love this. You actually have a process, a step-by-step process that is easy to follow. Step one, define decision and successful outcomes. What do you want to accomplish? Step two, gather information, then outline possible options, then narrow it down, gain buy-in, make the decision, implement the decision, and measure progress. And then you rinse and repeat. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes it's not as linear as it may seem at first glance. Sometimes you may need to go from step 4 back to step 1, because you know what? We thought we were aligned on the intent and what success looks like. And now we're finding that we have some very strong differences in opinion on that. So we need to go back to the drawing board, and that's key.
What's the hardest one out of these to really implement and get consensus on?
It depends on the decision itself. That's, I spend a lot of my time project managing. So I'm going to give the project manager answer of it depends. However,
Please.
I find if you skip step 1, if you do not define what success looks like and have a clear intent statement, are we trying to make this decision to save money? Are we trying to make this decision to gain a new market base? Are we trying to make this decision for any other reason? If you don't align on that, and I suggest creating a slide with 1 or 2 sentences defining the intent of the decision itself so you can keep pointing back. If you skip this step, every single one of the following steps are the hardest step.
Yeah. That is so true. I mean, I invested in a company years ago, and I would go to the annual stockholders meeting, and I held on to the stock, and they were doing great work and all this. And then there was one meeting when I showed up where they said they were changing direction and they were putting the word digital in the name, and their marketing slogan was a run-on sentence. And that's when I knew they weren't clear, they weren't defined, and they were reacting to fear and panic in the market. And I dumped my stock at that point, and I'm glad I did. They went out of business years later, but very quickly, years later. And I see that all the time. I hate corporate speak. I hate to say it. All those acronyms and all those things, just say it, please. That gets in the way sometimes. I know people like to take information and really make it succinct and simple and easy. And a lot of times some of these acronyms are way out there. They're really not defining what you want to define. So I like the fact that you said that about clarity. Do you have any examples from your own clients that you've worked with where you've really crushed it when it came to teaching them this process?
I think it's a different scenario for each of the clients. And that's because sometimes they skip a step. Sometimes they're all the way through the process and they've already made a decision. And now it's about implementation of that decision. And so, yes, we have a lot of examples of how we've been successful applying this same process to actual customers, but it does depend on where they're at in the process. If they're clear on their intent and they need, an unbiased facilitator to come in and work them through the decision process, that looks a lot different than here's our decision. It's a high impact one that we just made. And now we're formally chartering a project and we want to bring in a professional project manager to help guide our team and teach them. So again, I know that's a little bit of it. It depends, but you've got to meet clients where they're at, and you've got to take some time to discover where they're at. And if you don't do that up front and you just take kind of what they think the need is at face value, sometimes you get into a little bit of a rat's nest.
Well, how are you able to discover very quickly which data to use and which not to use? Because we're in a day and age where we're being bombarded consistently with information. And I look around sometimes, I just wrote an article on LinkedIn, and basically it says, you can be a graphic designer on Canva, but that's like, microwaving your dinner and calling yourself a chef. You have to have you have to see the much bigger purpose of why you're doing what you're doing. It's all about intention. And you can't have intention unless you are clear, as you talked about, clear on the mission of what you're doing. And second, you have to really define where you're headed, the bigger picture of why you're doing all this. So intention and your why are incredibly important.
Absolutely. The number one thing that you have to do when you go in, or when I'm working with a client, ask a lot of questions and be a good listener. Mm-hmm. You're not there. I'll use a word I haven't used in a long time. You're not there to showboat and tell everyone how smart you are. I love that word, by the way. I should use that more.
Wait a minute. You're redefining my whole life now.
You're not there to showboat and be a show off. You are there to learn. And I'll give a shout out to Damon Lemby on his Learn It All Leader as well, because asking questions, being open-minded, he touches on a lot of those things. And so I like to ask for a diverse group of stakeholders when I'm going in, and I ask them sets of questions that are dependent upon what they're trying to accomplish, and see, are we all aligned on what we're trying to do? Are we all aligned on where we're at in the process? And then I can surface and say, here's where you thought you are. Here's where I think you actually are. And now let's go ahead and close that gap.
You just said something that anybody who's in HR, or if you're a salesperson, you're trying to pitch, or you are somebody who's trying to get new business, you're in charge of that. You just nailed something that I feel is the number one key when it comes to really doing complex work and winning accounts like this. And that is ask questions. Just take notes. I learned this by accident. And I have to be honest, it was a long time ago. We went in on a very large project for Polygram. And we went in, and I think we spent 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes in an hour and a half meeting showing the ideas we had for their website. They were building their very first website. And we spent the rest of the meeting, and there was marketing people on one side and tech people on the other. And we just asked questions for the rest of the meeting. And we actually felt bad because we didn't get to do our presentation. We were literally, we weren't done. We went back to the office. We won the account. Like within, a couple of weeks, they made their decision. And we just looked at each other like, what the hell just happened? We won an account without pitching. And we started to make that our, je ne sais quoi, that certain something, as they say, as our secret sauce for pitching accounts. And I still use it today. I had a 4-hour meeting with a prospective client, and I just took notes and walked away. And the person was like, that was the best meeting I've ever had. And I'm like, I didn't talk about myself. I talked about you. That's the key. Get them to talk about themselves. That's from the Dale Carnegie School of Win Friends and How to Influence People in the 101.
I usually have that book on my desk. I don't want to show you my desk for sure, but I love that book. And one of my favorite lines out of that book is, the only way to influence people is to make them want to do something. That's the what's in it for me side of it. And I think that is so key. And I've left meetings, first meet and greets where I realized they didn't ask one question about me. And I'm not talking like a client meeting. I'm talking about just let's get to know someone. There's maybe someone in the community that you're meeting for the first time, and you leave and you're like, oh, that felt really one-sided.
Yeah.
And those meetings don't feel good. And you're absolutely right. You left your showboating at home and you ask them questions, because that's what you need to do, is understand their needs. And that's how, as a consultant or a leader, you're going to help people knock it out of the park.
Yeah, yeah, the showboating part is rough because I've been asked to come to meetings and somebody will introduce me and I have a pretty good resume. And then for the next 45 minutes, everybody's going, well, I did this and and then we're all comparing. And it's like, okay, can we get the meeting back on agenda for what we want to do? It becomes, you know, something comes to mind that's actually crass, but I'm not going to say it. It's literally everybody showboating around the table to prove they're just as equal. And if you have to do that, chances are you're not as big a deal as you think you are. That's how I look at it. I'm not as big a deal as I might think I am. So, at all cases, in all moments. We have to catch ourselves constantly, I feel. Anyways, you talked about something in the book and I breezed over it, but I love this subject, and that is, how do we get over being blinded by biases? We all have that blind spot in our minds, and coaching helps, but I've been in situations where you get tested for what your biases are, and it's kind of shocking what you don't know that you don't know. Am I right?
100%. You're absolutely correct. And this is where I like to think about different types of people sitting at the table. So personality types are really important. And when we think about some of the, tests that are out there, personality test, the one that I really like to use is DISC Workplace. And there's a lot of different kind of versions, management, leadership.
DISC is my favorite of the behavioral communication styles. It really is.
I love it. And that's made up of kind of your inborn preferences and your actual experience. And so you bring those two together. And when there's a situation at work, this is how I behave because of kind of my natural style, and because I've learned that maybe it's better to react some ways versus others. We've all had some of those lessons learned, I'm sure.
Who cares if Kathy has a birthday? I got sales to meet. That's a high D, right?
Oh, they all focus on something. Yeah, our high Ds, results.
Yes.
Yes. And so here's the thing. I like to tell people to think about their personality type as their favorite room in their house. What's your favorite room, Brad?
Yeah, my studio, actually. It's I'm an artist. I'm in a high I, if you haven't figured that out, interpersonal. So yeah, I like my studio.
Well, there you go. So you feel most comfortable there. You love it. You get energized by it. Someone else in your family, maybe their favorite room is the living room. And that doesn't mean that you should just be in your studio while they're in the living room and scream back and forth. Like, sometimes you have to leave your most comfortable room to meet someone where they're at.
Yes.
And what we find when we're talking about decision-making, biases, collaboration, is that sometimes it's more challenging to work with people that have a very different style than ours. And so you're a high I. Our C types often like more of that heads down work. I like to, contribute without being in a load of meetings and collaboration. Doesn't mean that they don't ever want to collaborate, but, maybe in moderation. And we need to make sure that we have all different styles around the table. And that way they think different than we do. And they hopefully challenge us on our biases, and we challenge them on their biases. And if we could say things like, walk me through your train of thought with this one, it can surface some of those things. So again, back to asking questions, right? And making sure that we're creating that atmosphere, trusting atmosphere, where we can share and not say, again, like, well, that's not right. That can't be right. We need to be open to other people's perspectives.
It's very powerful when you learn this, especially when it becomes, um, how do they say it? Unconscious. I forget what they call it. Anyways, it'll come to me later. Uh, this is very powerful because a friend of mine who happens to be a corporate coach and a keynote speaker, he taught me about DISC. And then he sat me down and he showed me how in one sentence I can make everybody in an audience happy. And it goes like this. He says, I know a lot of you think this is a waste of time, but if you sit with me and have some patience, not only are we going to learn, we're going to have a lot of fun. And for those of you who have to see the data and the PowerPoint presentation, I will make those available to you through this email. You show it on the screen. You say, just email me, and I promise I will send you the data. Right there, you've made 4 of the groups happy behavioral communication styles, happy in the moment, DISC. Uh, and once I learned that, which I think everybody should, to be able to pitch new business or be able to convince somebody that a decision has to be made a certain way. Once you know all these 4 behavioral communication styles, it's not easy. I'm not going to say it becomes easy, but your track record grows simply because you now know how to communicate outside of your own bubble to what someone else needs. So I thank you. I love DISC. I really do.
I love everything that you just shared. And I agree that being able to think about who's on the receiving end and deliver a message that they connect with, it's a huge gift. And I will also share something with you, kind of a secret, but it won't be for long.
Okay,
I have,
lean in.
are you ready?
Yes.
I have type envy. I wish I had more of the I style in me. So I love having eyes on the team because I am all work, no play.
Wow.
I'm on the DC line. So dominant conscientiousness, and I will lean into data all day long. And it took me a long time to think about the people side of things, the relationship side of things. And I've had to work on that. So that doesn't come as naturally to me, which is why, as a project manager, like, I'm good with results. I am good with accuracy. And I could build the best damn spreadsheet and project plan than anyone. But guess what? If you don't have the buy-in, if you don't have the people that are willing to really support you, then your plan just goes in the trash.
It's true.
People are part of everything.
Yeah. For those of you who got lost as soon as we started saying DISC, it's called DISC Behavioral Communications. And if you're into Myers-Briggs, this is different. It's much simpler. And it basically says we have 4 traits in us, behavioral communication traits, but we lead naturally with certain traits when we're at business or we're at home. We adapt, each trait shifts. So uh, you just said, Candace, that you are a high D and a C. So here's something that people might not know. D's are driven people. They're like the bald eagles in every organization. They're either the CEO or head of sales or the top salesperson. High I's are interpersonal people. They're like Bill Clinton. I feel your pain. You know, he can identify with other people. And I's are always spotted because they will start meetings by, hey, Jerry, how are your kids doing? Whereas D's start meetings with, did you sign that contract yet? Did you get it done? They're pushing. 43% of the people who get work done within an organization are S's. And those are steadfast people. They're usually engineers. They're the 80-20 rule. They're usually the 20% who are crushing it, but they don't stand up and look around and have big personalities usually. C's are usually your IT guys who sit in the back who never go to meetings. They're usually very contemplative. They have to read everything. They are tough to make a decision and take action. Sometimes you have to convince them with fear. Sometimes both S's and C's need logic. Um, But in sales departments, it's always D's and I's. And I'm going to point this out, Candace. You can tell me I'm right or I'm wrong because you do this for a living. But in organizations, D's usually make everyone mad because they don't deal in emotions. They don't care that Candace had a birthday. They don't care. It's like, I'm gonna crush my numbers. They'll work till midnight. They will burn out, and still keep going. And they usually make the S's and the C's very angry, and HR departments get complaints. And the one group that helps, that buffer zone helps them communicate, is the I's. And guess who gets fired first in most organizations? I's, because they're seen as the talkative ones. They talk too much. So sorry, we went off on a tangent there on something we both love. I can help you with that I part because I'm a high I. My girlfriend, on the other hand, is a high D. High D and high S, actually. She works in the accounting space. So it's very fun. So let's get back to your book. What made you want to write this, by the way? Because I know everybody has that story and then we're like, yeah, I'm so frustrated. I got to write a book about it. Or, hey, this is what I do. I got to write a book.
I work with a lot of different types of organizations and a lot of different industries. And this was a huge theme, decision making. And I would hear from senior leaders that people at more junior levels weren't making decisions. They're not making the decisions that we expect them to. They keep pushing everything up to us. And then I'd hear from more junior people in the organization that we're not empowered to make decisions. Or if we make a decision and it doesn't go perfect, we get hammered. So we're really being told we're empowered, but we're also not using it as a learning lesson when things don't go perfect. And so I'm seeing that there's a lot of disconnect going on, which is why one of my favorite chapters on decision-making roles is in here. So we want to know in any decision, who is the decision maker? Then we want to know who needs to provide input. And we then talk about a driver of the decision. This may or may not be the same person that is the decision maker. Because Brad, you may tell me, Candace, go out and gather all of this information. Here's the intent of our decision. And I go out and do all the legwork. And then I bring it back and present it to you. And you make a decision. I would be the driver, someone keeping things moving forward, but maybe not the decision maker. And then the last one, implementation. We talked about kind of project management. How do we actually move this forward in a way that feels good to everyone and get it implemented? So that was a big reason for wanting to write this book, because you don't know how to have some of those conversations within an organization or within your team unless you have some terminology, or some shared terminology is even better, regarding, are we empowered? Who's the decision maker? Those types of things. Then you can actually start moving forward the process.
I teach generational issues in a workshop. And I wanted to ask you, what sort of generational issues have you been dealing with inside organizations? Because I know we still haven't gotten comfortable with this generational divide that's taking place. So let's talk about that a little bit, because what drives a baby boomer will never drive a millennial.
Absolutely. The number one, and there's a lot more out there, and I'm sure that this varies based on organizations. I think one that really discourages the younger generations are butts and seats. I think they really value the freedom to get some work on their plate and then be empowered to do it in their way, where they want to do it from. And so I think the old expectation of you need to be here at your desk from 9 to 5, it also discourages people from working when they have their peaks in energy, because I think that's different for all of us. So that causes a little bit of kind of separation. And some of the older generation still thinks if someone's not sitting in that or at that desk, they're not working. So I think it's a little bit of a change of mindset.
I agree. We have to shift from, our 8-hour day was a bucket and you filled it with stuff to do. But when the computer came into the home, we now shifted from, I'm at work, I should be working. I'm at home, I should be having dinner, hanging out with my spouse, and playing with the kids. That time correlation with where you were at, your place of work determined what you were doing. Your task was hitched to your place. And so now we've shifted that, and now you can work anywhere you want. And we have a generation that's been raised in that, have laptop, will travel. I wrote most of my books, I write at Barnes and Noble, cafes, or at Starbucks. I sit there and I crank it out. And so we are not hinged to those traditional models. But I also believe that in a lot of these business schools, they're still clinging to the old belief systems. Like, don't get too attached to your star employee. If they act up, fire them. You have to have AIS, sorry, butts in seats, BIS, butts in seats, mentality, because we don't trust employees. What you are setting yourself up to, and I want you to talk about this, is we're stepping out of this parent-child dynamic that was present in these companies. We just didn't know it. If the boss is there, we work hard. If the boss is not there, we make paper airplanes and fool around. Boomers, I can tell you, I'm a baby boomer. I know that I learned how to look busy in front of my boss doing busy work, and that habit stayed with me so long. I started to realize, wait a minute, why am I doing this? I'm wasting time. And it really was to fill an 8-hour day. Well, we don't need that anymore. Now we can work at home for 2 hours here, take a break, another hour and a half, and later on finish up the project. So let's talk about that a little bit. We are transforming from a parent control dynamic really into an adult work environment. Am I correct?
I agree with you. Yes. And I'm trying to, I have so many thoughts. I'm like, oh,
do it, say it, do it.
Yes. I mean, we're transitioning, and we're seeing some of the older generation that's starting to retire, right? And for some organizations, it happens faster, I think, based on industry. But there's another dynamic to this as well, which is the younger generation, in my opinion, very, very good at the tools and technology that are out there. And so when we are leaders and we're delegating, I think we need to focus on the what success looks like with this completed task versus the how. And we let them figure out the how. Because I will tell you, I'm going to give a huge shout out to Luke. I had an intern over the summer that was moving into his junior year in college, and he knocked my socks off. He was 100% remote, and I do value some in-person time. So we had an in-person offsite to make sure that we're all aligned on what the summer was going to look like and some of the work. I think that builds trust faster, getting that FaceTime. I do enjoy that. But then once Luke was clear on his role and what successful outcomes were going to be, he brought some ways to get there to the table that were much more creative and much better solutions than I could have ever thought of. I didn't even know some of these things existed. So we're talking about time as well, right? So we're talking about butts and seats, but allowing people to, if they can get there a lot faster, because we're not telling them the how to get there, that's really key as well. I don't want to discourage someone from working efficiently because I need them to be in the office for 8 hours.
What do you think of reverse mentorship? And that's basically, an adult who's been in the business world maybe 40 years doesn't sit there, showboating, and instead listens to the advice of a younger person and vice versa. What do you think of that?
I think it's absolutely necessary to keep your business innovative. If you're not doing that, then other organizations are, and they're going to have more innovation than yours, because we don't want to keep doing them. We don't want to keep doing things the same way that we always have, because our world isn't standing still. Our world, especially with AI now, is moving at a rapid pace. If we are doing things the way we always have, we're way behind others.
We are. People are writing books with AI. They're solving their marketing problems with AI. They're doing everything, that used to be task driven with AI. So let's go, folks. Got to embrace it. You said it great. How do we get a hold of you, Candice? Where do we go?
You can go to LinkedIn, of course. I'm on LinkedIn, Kandis Porter. And you can also go to my website, effectiveflowconnections.com.
Mhm.
And then finding Damon, the co-author, he's at learning.com.
Yeah. You guys are a great team. Ladies and gentlemen, pick up her book, and it's written by her and Damon. Good Decisions Equal Success. Stop decision anxiety and start taking action. Wonderful to have you on Awaken Nation today. Thank you so much. The time has flown by. I can't believe it's 10 till the hour, but we're not going to let you go yet. I have a lightning round, but what's it like to work with you, by the way? What do you do when you come into an organization? What's the first step?
I almost always build in a discovery phase when someone reaches out and wants to work. So that's when I go in, I ask the questions, I confirm the scope of work, and then give them that level two type of proposal where, hey, here's how I think we'll best collaborate. But I'm very much a roll up my sleeves, work next to the smart leaders. And the thing is, I always think of it as sometimes people are running out of like a burning building. And then they're like, okay, Candice, you need to run into the building because we need your help. By the time someone's hiring a consultant, they're well aware that they need some support in a certain area. And I love running into burning buildings, I guess.
You're one of those weirdos, huh? Yeah. I wanted to ask about corporate culture real quick because you can enter a place. And I remember when I was first starting my speaking career, this is like 12, 15 years ago, I was asked to give a keynote up at MasterCard Worldwide, which is separate from the regular MasterCard. They're really the database part of this. And they're up in, I think it's called Purchase. It's up near Rye, New York. And we walked into this brand new IM Pay building that had been revamped. It was a postmodern, half century modern building, wide open spaces, lots of concrete, lots of windows and all this. And you could see the cultural difference between the baby boomers and then the Gen X and the millennials because they had foosball tables, ping pong tables, break rooms, nap pods, everything. Boomers wouldn't go near any of that stuff. And the millennials were just like taking naps at 2. I'll get back to work at 4. I mean, it was crazy, the corporate culture. What is it when people work with you? Do you spend some time really learning the corporate culture, understanding? Because nothing's going to get done if you don't understand the culture. At least that's my belief.
The corporate culture is critical when we talk about the change management aspects. And we're talking about when we're in implementation, but oftentimes we're trying to get buy-in as well. There's a lot of times where I say, hey, everyone, here's my proposed solution. I really need you to poke holes in it and stress test it because you know your team better than I do, what's going to work and what's not going to work. And I think that it is critical to understand corporate culture. And we also have to understand that different teams may have a slightly different culture. So if I'm working with IT, they may have a great culture. They are very data driven a lot of times and great leadership buy-in. Another team over here, they may not have much trust. They get hammered for decisions. They get hammered for other things. And so you don't just look at like organizational culture from the top down. You have to look at the individual teams as well.
I agree with that because my book actually became recommended reading at a large computer company. And their big problem was they were working in a hybrid environment. So they had DevOps, which is development operations, how to get things done. and they were divided right down the middle between hardware. And hardware people look at everything like a brick to brick installation. I'm building a house, here's what I do. And software could never keep pace because sometimes software development would take 6 months longer than the actual build out of the, let's say they were doing a server farm. And so there was constant this fight all the time between the hardware people who couldn't see that software people were like, they were like cooking, they were making art, whereas hardware people were doing like brick to brick installations. How do you deal in hybrid environments like that? Because there's got to be some commonality, and there also has to be some flexibility and give and take. That's how I see it.
Oh my gosh, add another hour to the clock. We're going to talk project management now, because this is something I get in great detail with a lot of teams on project management. And, the hardware is often waterfall approach. We're going to develop a plan. We're going to follow the plan, and it's going to be step by step by step. It's very predictable. Right. When we talk about the software, it's usually agile. We're iteratively delivering and making things kind of better along the way. You still need a shared vision. And I think it's key that the teams align and agree on key milestones. And then they get to have those conversations about those key milestones versus each nitty gritty task that needs to be done that will be very different for the different teams. And so commitment, we need commitment to key milestones. And this is what we're working towards. So that's oftentimes how I do it. I try to get the different teams in a room and create that shared vision.
Wow. That's extraordinary that you can do that, because I've almost seen fist fights, between these two groups. Back in the day, it was marketing people were fighting with IT departments. That was the big divide, because the guys who installed your servers felt they were the internet. And the marketing people were like, no, 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 no. You're creating an interactive brochure. It's the marketing part that makes the site what it is. They were constantly fighting. So I'm glad you have a solution, because it's scary.
I'm laughing because I've literally had clients, or client inquiries where they say, hey, Kandis, can you come in? We heard that, agile is the best approach moving forward. And we really want to loosen up our due dates and loosen up kind of how we're executing projects. And I immediately ask, well, what types of projects are they? I mean, you don't want to get on an agile type approach if you're building a house and then your costs are astronomical because you have all these change requests throughout. So I think that some people misinterpret agile project management to like an agile mindset. And we need to clarify and make sure that, again, we're aligned on terminology. And using agile project management doesn't mean that you just get to throw due dates out the window and like, we'll get there when we get there. And so those are some of the candid conversations that are important to have when you see different teams butting heads because they're using different approaches.
This is hilarious because we can laugh now, but figuring it out wasn't easy. It's effectiveflowconnections.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Go pick up Kandis Porter's book along with Damon Lemby. And yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for being on Awakened Nation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Brad. I hope we can do this again sometime, or we'll just talk for a whole business day. We'll just set up one-on-one time.
We should do a whole hour on DISC, behavioral communications. That would be fun.
I love DISC, and I realize in my career that changed the game for me. When I started bringing the data along with the consideration of people, it changed everything. It's important.
I wish I had learned it in the beginning of my career because, I literally could have had, and I'm not being flippant about this, but I literally could have had people eating out of the palm of my hand simply because I understood what they needed. Because the Dale Carnegie books, they're great. I get the basics of it, but with DISC, that's sort of like the mechanics of it all, and that's what I love about it. So good. So Kandis, this is the lightning round, and I like to ask some questions so that my listeners can get to know you better. So my first question, are you ready?
Yes.
My first question is, what do you do to relax?
Oh, we already talked about me being a high D. Do you think that
I
I
know.
actually relax? Okay, so this is a true statement, and you might think it's a little absurd. However, I have discovered cryotherapy, full body cryotherapy, where I love to
Yes.
go into an ice box that is minus 280-ish degrees and
Yep.
stay in there for 3.5 minutes. And I get such an endorphin rush and I just feel so good afterwards. So that's true.
Do you know who Wim Hof is, the Iceman?
Yes, I do.
His daughter is going to be on my show in January, so we might coordinate these two. But she has the Ice Women community that she's created, so you might want to join that community.
Noted. I'm on it. It's very cool. Very cool.
Good, good. My second question is, do you have throughout your whole life, this doesn't have to be business related, but do you have a favorite memory at all?
Yes. I mean, if I can answer that fast, it must be, right?
Yeah.
So when I was little, I absolutely adore my grandparents and they're 90s, live in Missouri, still on a 300-acre farm by themselves. They're fantastic. And my grandpa Chuck, he's actually on my book dedication page. He
Mhm.
used to dress up as Santa at different times of the year. And we'd just go to their house for dinner almost every Sunday. And just out would come Santa Chuck and he'd give us little gifts. And I am from a big family. And we would be screaming. It'd be like May and Santa Chuck would be here. And we would always ask throughout the year, like, when is Santa Chuck coming? When is Santa Chuck coming? It was always unpredictable and very fun.
That is a great story. Thank you. That's really cool. Um, Let me ask you one more question. This is the last question. What is your sanctuary?
Mm, such a good question.
Thank you. I just thought of it. I literally have never asked that one. But yeah, what's your sanctuary?
It's my home. It really is. It's my home and my family. I have 3 rescue dogs. And when I think about when I am at peace, I have my husband home and I'm probably sitting on the couch with all 3 rescue dogs curled up on the couch. We tried to have a no couch rule for a while and just relaxing.
That's awesome. I really have to ask you this. What out of the disc is your husband?
Okay, you're going to be shocked. He has not done a disc report. And I have tried to typecast him so many times. And I am 99% sure that he would show up the exact same as me. I think
You're
that he would
kidding.
be a DC. And
Wow.
when we are on the same page to execute something, we move at a rapid speed. It's like getting those results, boom, it happened yesterday. When we are at odds, we are each other's worst enemies. So it's a
Yeah.
blessing and a curse.
Yeah, I was just going to say, usually high Ds wind up marrying high Is who have some D in them because you can't not have some of that. Wow, I'm impressed. I'm very impressed.
He could, this is where I vary a little bit. He could be closer to the DI, but his job is decision analytics for
Oh,
healthcare. And he is in the details and he loves doing the analysis, which
wow,
makes
that's
me
rare.
think he's got to be on that DC side.
Well, Ds usually don't have uh, detail. They're not detail oriented, but C and S are. So he got to have some of that in him. Awesome. Well, good. We got to know a lot about you and your family.
Yes. I feel like we talked so much about asking questions And I want to know, what's your sanctuary?
Believe it or not, I love the desert. That's why I moved back to Vegas. And I love to sit in the backyard, whether it's 113 degrees. I like, going on a hike up to Red Rock, up in the mountains. Don't care how hot it is. I absorb that sunlight. I like to meditate in the backyard. We are right at the edge of Vegas. So, the backyard is a dust bowl, but we have chairs and a fire pit and everything set up. I just love that. And I can just, sit in that all day long. And yeah, that's where my bliss is. And my girlfriend, she's been beyond supportive of our journey together, which has been wonderful. Never met anybody like that. So she's part of my sanctuary as well. So there.
Fantastic. I
People,
love Vegas, and I am
yeah,
so proud to be a Nevadan. I love our
Nevadan.
entire state.
Yeah, I love it here. And I discovered it by accident. I lived in New York City for 35 years, grew up in Pennsylvania, and my nephew had to move out here and he said, "Hey, can you drive me cross country to move?" I said, "Sure." So in 4 days, we drove into Vegas and basically he got a job here, got him set up. And I said, 2 weeks I spent here and I was going around. I go, I think I could live here. And I came out for my birthday in 2018, spent almost a month here. And I said, I think I love this place. And I moved here. I don't gamble. I don't go to strip clubs. I don't do any of that. I like a good buffet and I like to hike. That's about it, and it just, it's incredible. The only time I go down to the strip is when friends come into town. I'm like, all right, let me show you around. It's like living next to Hershey Park, which I did as a kid. Okay, you want to go to the park? I'll show you. But, it's like New Yorkers. They never go to the Statue of Liberty unless, friends come by. So I love it.
Our favorite place to stay, we tend to stay off strip. We love Red Rock Casino, and it sees the Red Rocks.
It's so beautiful.
You're hiking, and that it makes me laugh because we decided to go on a big hiking trip in June for my birthday a few years ago. And it was 120 plus degrees. And we actually thought, well, we'll go really early morning where it was only about 115 degrees. So needless to say, we did not get in the hiking, but we did get to look at the Red Rocks from Red Rock Casino, which is such a fun part of town.
It is. I tell people who want to come here, like in the middle of August, I say, have you ever stuck your head in an oven? They're like, yeah. I go, that's Vegas. And if the heat doesn't release at night, it still feels like you're putting your head in an oven. But I love Red Rock for one simple reason. I like going up to the mountains there, doing a hike, and then I come down and I go to the food court in the Red Rock Casino, and I get one of those fat burgers. They have an organic fat burger with a gluten-free bun and everything on it. And I sit there and I chomp away. And then, we love that casino. We go to it all the time because it's the casinos that are not on the strip are more family oriented and for the locals. So it's a lot more fun. Like you can get prime rib dinner, all the fixings, everything like $15. And so we do that.
They have great cabanas at their swimming pool too.
Yes.
We like to do the cabanas at the Red Rock Casino.
It's awesome.
See, all good decisions. It was driven by these types of books that got us there.
Yes. Instead of bad decisions, we make good decisions. Thank you. Anyways, this should be out in about 3 weeks, if that's okay. And great.
Thank you so much for welcome. Taking Damon's word that I'm an okay person.
And well, I trust him. Me. You bet. Kandis Porter, thank you so much for being on Awakened Nation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Brad. It's been such a pleasure.
And we'll have you back on. Trust me. I love what you're talking about. So, hey, everybody, tune in next week. And we're going to have another great guest here on Awakened Nation. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success will be because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.